Uh, then let us begin until others who wish to join us come on board. Um, Thank you all for joining this interesting seminar. The Bhikkhu University of Sri Lanka, one of the leading institutions of Buddhist learning in Asia, is very happy to uh, have this organize this webinar and also have two of the great scholars in Buddhism here with us. And even in the audience, I can see some persons who are very knowledgeable in the field there. So anyway, let me say something about the uh, topic first and then introduce our speaker today. The topic, in general terms, it comes uh, within the main concept of uh, Buddhism and neurology. Uh, so this particular interface has not been properly surveyed up to now. I remember about 10, 15 years ago, I was hearing from a person with the name Ravi Vijay Sirivardhana, a doctor by profession, who presented the paper on this theme to the Bhikkhu University. But thereafter, I think Professor Channa Ratnatunga was writing to the papers, and we read them with great interest. We are very happy to have him in our audience today. Uh, so, with those few words, let me introduce the speaker of the day, that is Madam Nandini Karunamuni. She is the Buddhist chaplain at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, in Canada. She holds a bachelor's degree in science from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's degree in health promotion from the School of Public Health at the University of Alberta. She is also qualified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher, trained through uh, the University of Massachusetts Medical School. Nandini has worked in various health-related fields, including a research associateship exploring social cognitive theories, uh, and uh, including including behavioral change. She has also published several academic articles, including papers relating to Buddhist theoretical foundations of mindfulness. She teaches mindfulness via the University of Alberta Wellness Supports and through the Alberta Insight Meditation Center. I think that's just a brief introduction, only the tip of the iceberg. She is a well trained person to do this, and also happen to inherit some of the knowledge from our one of the most prominent, well-known uh, researchers in Buddhist philosophy, that was late Professor K.N. Jayatilaka. We remember him with a lot of gratitude at this moment. So, with those words, may I have the pleasure of inviting Madam Nandini Veeramuni to deliver her presentation. Uh, and also, I must alert the audience about a few things. She will speak about 50 minutes to 1 hour, and thereafter, our discussant, Professor Premsiri, he will start the discussion, and discussion will continue for another hour or so. So in the meantime, while the speaker is presenting her slides and things, you are welcome to leave messages in the chat box. And these messages will be read and answered wherever possible. Uh, so please make use of this opportunity to query whatever you wish to ask from Madam Nandini. So with those words, may I have the privilege of inviting Madam Nandini to deliver her presentation. Thank you. Nandini?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Madhumay Bandara. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So thank you for the introduction, and thank you for all the people who put in effort to organize this event, and welcome to all the participants here. Thank you for being here. So, so the topic I'm going to be talking about is neuroscientific understandings of meditation, a Buddhist perspective. So, what I'm presenting in this talk comes from some of the material that I have published in an academic articles, couple of academic articles recently, and also from an article that I'm currently working on. So, so I'm going to be exploring some of the latest developments in mindfulness and meditation research, and also how neuroscientific findings relate to that are related to mindfulness and meditation. I will have we will have a look at those as well, and I'll be looking in terms of how neuroscientific understandings and wisdom teachings of the Buddha, how the two fields intersect, and in terms of any convergence of understandings, and also the relevance and the applicability of using neuroscientific understandings to better understand wisdom teachings of the Buddha. So that's what we'll be exploring. I hope everyone can see the slides I'm presenting. So if you broadly look at neuroscience and Buddhism, they have two vastly different, their goals are very vast. So for example, neuroscience is the goal of neuroscience is to understand the structure and function of the nervous system, and it uses the third person perspective. So so the nervous system, the main organ of the nervous system is the brain, and the brain consists of billions of neurons connecting in very complex ways, transmitting information and receiving information and so on. So for those who are not familiar with this type of picture, this picture, let me get just a moment please, I'll get the laser pointer here so it's easier for me to point. Okay, here it is. So so this picture here with all the colored stuff, neurons in the brain of a human, they are colored differently so that it's easy to distinguish the cells. So so in Buddhism, goal is to understand the nature of human experience, and it uses the first person perspective. And I'm also going to look at how the two perspectives relate to each other. And this is about understanding how the brain relates to the mind. So it's about the mind-brain correspondence. So, so in this presentation, I'm first going to look at neuroscientific understandings of meditation and mindfulness. And then we will move on to Buddhist understandings, wisdom related understandings. And then we'll talk about how the two perspectives relate to each other. So, so moving on. So because some of you may not be coming from a scientific background, I thought before I talk about neuroscientific understandings, I'll give a very brief overview of scientific third-person understandings, what we mean by third-person understanding in science. So the goal of science is to systematically understand the natural world. So, and it uses the third-person perspective. So to give a little an idea or illustrate how science comes up with understandings, let's think of children playing at a beach, and perhaps they would collect some seashells, and then the children might talk among themselves how to sort. They might collect some seashells and they may want to sort them into different piles. And some children might suggest, let's do it by color. And some, if it has some type of color, let's put it into one group, and the others, the white ones, will go to a different group. Or they might say, the broken ones, let's sort them in one heap, and the ones that are intact in another heap. And another person might say, let's sort them by size. So different ideas, and they might even give a label to, or a name to these different heaps of seashells. So, the children collaborated and did sorted the seashells. So just like that, science is a collaborative process. So it involves the exchange of ideas and information among scientists, naming objects and things and phenomena, measuring things, and even coming up with ways of measuring things, and also questioning and re-questioning some of the assumptions that someone might be making. So science we can say that it's a very valuable for humanity, because it raises our quality of life. Medicine, for example, has made so many strides in understandings, coming up with antibiotics, vaccines, and so on. Even other fields of study, lots of fields of study, agriculture, there are so many advances, and predicting the weather and so on. So even this talk today, this presentation wouldn't have happened if not for technological advances. So we are very grateful for scientific understandings. So moving on, so using the third person perspective, scientists also study the brain. So they would give names to different parts of the brain, and scientists have noticed that our thinking is correlated with brain activity. So, the scientists, what the scientists do is to put electrodes or sensors called electrodes on the scalp of people, and monitor the electric activity to understand what parts of the brain are associated with different types thinking. For example, scientists might look at the brain activity when you are having experience in your senses, for example, seeing, hearing, and so on. And also when movements happen or during speech, what parts get activated in the brain, and when someone is having an emotional reaction, what are the parts that get activated, and when solving, doing a memory task, they might find out the brain regions. So it's kind of mapping the brain. So there are other techniques too. So what I just talked about is about electroencephalography. There are other ways of monitoring the brain activity. For example, MRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and so on. So I won't read them out, just for the sake of saving time. So now, so scientists also study meditation and mindfulness in this way. So around the year 2000, scientists began to investigate people who have or long-term practitioners of meditation. Scientists investigated by placing electrodes in their scalp. So they brought people like this monk. His name is Minga Rinpoche. He was brought to a lab in US, and after placing these sensors on his scalp, they asked him to engage in metta practice, loving kindness meditation. And so what they did was asked him to practice metta for 1 minute, take a break for 30 seconds, and then 1 minute, and so on. So when they did that, they've noticed a huge burst of electric activity in his brain when he meditated on metta. And then it stopped when he took a break, or it got the activity got lower. So it was so big, the amount of activity was so huge, enormous, that the scientists thought maybe they have set up the experiment wrong, or maybe some sensor got removed accidentally. So, but when they tested it, this was what was happening in his brain when they repeated the experiment. So, and also they looked at his brain in other ways, using other techniques, and it was the same thing. So when they used fMRI, they found that his brain activity during metta meditation was 700 to 800 times higher than the resting state. So it's a huge difference. And scientists also tested other individuals who have practiced for a long time, and they got the same result. So, and so this type of thing started around the year 2000. So fast forward 20 years later, 20 plus years later, lots of studies have happened in this type of investigation. And I thought I'll show you a more recent study. So this is a randomized control trial performed among people who were opioid dependent. So they're kind of addicted or only dependent on long-term opioid users. Let's see. So, so it had two groups. Some of you may know what randomized control study is. If not, it's about having two groups more or less equal, and then treating one group differently than the other group. So So the one group got the meditation intervention of calming meditation. So they did body scan meditation. So in case anyone is not familiar with that, it's about being aware of your body sensations. So it's done as a meditation practice. You may start from the top of your head, gradually moving to different parts of the body, all the way to the soles of your feet. And as you do this, if your mind drifts into thoughts, which happens so often, you would gently and kindly bring the mind back. So these people were taught that type of meditation, and the control group got let me see, a supportive it was a supportive psychotherapy group, the other group, and they found that there was a significant change in the sense of in opioid use, and also the people who got the intervention had reported feelings of peace and bliss, and also that the brain waves changed. So significant change in their brainwave activity. So anyone can look up that paper if you wish to do so. Now, also mindfulness is getting very popular in the Western world. And this person is Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, and he's generally considered the person who is responsible for spreading mindfulness practices in the West. So he was a molecular biologist, and he learned meditation from mostly Zen Buddhist teachers, so people like Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and other teachers as well. So he found these practices to be so useful in his life that he decided to teach others. So he worked in a hospital, and he told the doctors there to send him any patients who are not getting better through Western treatments, like pain patients who were dealing with a lot of pain, and they were not improving with pain treatments, and also people who had terminal illness. So these people got sent to Dr. Kabat-Zinn, and he would teach them mindfulness. And he found a huge difference in the people, in the sense that they were able to deal with their pain. They had pain, and they developed a sense of well-being, and they were able to go on with their lives in spite of the pain, in spite of the illness, and so on. So the changes were so huge and beneficial for people that Dr. John Kabat-Zinn decided to make this into a program. It's called mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it's available. It's a course that people take who want to learn mindfulness, and it teaches different types of practices. The body scan that I described, breath meditation, loving kindness meditation, walking meditation, and they also include yoga in this program of the 8-week stress reduction course. So moving on. So the mindfulness is also studied scientifically. To study something scientifically from the third person perspective, the scientists need to define what mindfulness is and be able to measure what it is. So, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn described or defined mindfulness as awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So, and now let's talk about measuring mindfulness. Now, to measure mindfulness, measuring is based on the idea that mindfulness is a natural human capacity. So it's about the ability to focus on what is happening in the here and now without without being carried away by the contents of your thoughts. So, we talked about the body scan meditation a little while ago, and how we might drift into thoughts, and we bring it back to the present moment of our body sensations. So the ability that you don't get drifted, your mind doesn't drift so much. So that's the ability is what is being measured. So how they measure it is, let me show you the next slide. Okay, there are measuring mindfulness. One is through self-report methods. So asking participants if they get easily distracted. So this is done through questionnaire, whether they get easily distracted, and if one finds it difficult to difficult to stay focused on what they're doing, and so on. So these types of questions go into this questionnaire, and an average of that is taken as the mindfulness score for that person. But there are also objective measures, and in case I'm assuming you know what the meaning of objective means. So these are methods that are different from self-report methods. So the way they come up with objective measures of mindfulness is to ask the person to breathe naturally, and then press a button at the end of the 9th breath or something like that. So they have to pay careful attention, and at the end of the 9th breath, they would press a button. So then the researchers get a sense of the person's mindfulness level of mindfulness. So now there's a lot of research being done on mindfulness. So starting around 2006, there has been an exponential growth in the publications of mindfulness research happening in this field. When we look at the overall understandings, we see mindfulness is beneficial for both mental and physical health. So that seems to be the overall one of the major findings that we can see from research. So I just thought there are so many studies, but I thought I'll just pick this one because it was published very recently, a couple of months ago. Let me see. Yeah, in May 2023. And it is published in a good journal, Nature Mental Health, and it's a systematic review and a meta-analysis in the sense that they looked at lots of studies for the evidence. It also incorporated over 2,000 patients, people or participants, and it included randomized studies. So what they found was, in comparison with passive control groups, mindfulness-based programs significantly reduced distress between 1 and 6 months. So that's the time interval they looked at in these studies. So another finding related to mindfulness is that ruminating on thoughts is a transdiagnostic risk factor to be diagnosed with a mental illness. So ruminating is the opposite of mindfulness. That's about getting caught up in thoughts. So you might have thoughts about the past and you get involved and you might regret things and maybe then project to the future and think, oh, what if this happens and what if that happens? And then you jump from thought to thought and keep thinking and thinking. So that's what is ruminating. So it's a risk factor to be diagnosed with a mental illness. Sometimes we refer to this as the monkey mind, going all over the place. So as an example article, I got this article published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, maladaptive repetitive thought as a transdiagnostic phenomena and treatment target, an integrative review. Maladaptive repetitive thoughts, the frequent repetitive revisiting of thoughts is associated with a range of psychopathological processes and disorders. So let's move on now. And another finding, an interesting finding in mindfulness research is a phenomenon known as the attentional blink. So now, if someone is, if some slides or letters or numbers are flashed rapidly to someone, and then the person is asked what letter came just after P or some letter, and this ability can differ among different people. So let's, I'll just click. I'm going to flash some letters and see if you can detect which letter came after the letter K. Okay, so I'm going to start now. Okay, so don't worry whether you got it or not. I just wanted to demonstrate how it is done. So after K came P, and some of you may have detected that. So this now, no matter how good you are at that, at a particular, if we increase the speed at which these letters are presented, there would be a speed beyond which you won't be able to recognize what letter came after another letter. So what researchers have found is mindfulness practice increases, or it improves this ability, so to detect small changes. So I've listed a couple of articles here that looked at this change. When you meditate, you are able to look at these small changes in experience of what is displayed. So, and there's another phenomena called emotional attentional blink. So here, researchers may flash pictures, and there are occasional target pictures that are displayed upside down or sideways. So the participants are asked to tell, after doing the flashing, they are asked, okay, which picture came was displayed sideways. So so there's they have different abilities. So, and some people may be able to do it better than others. Now, the interesting thing is, if the scientists display this type of image, it's called a disgust distractor. So you're kind of a little bit shaken with that kind of picture, and that affects you from noticing the target picture. So here again, what they have found is that if you train in mindfulness, you are less influenced by these types of pictures, and you're able to remember the target picture. So hope you understood what I'm saying. So so another phenomenon that that I thought I should talk about is a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. So a long time ago, researchers or scientists thought that brains don't change after birth, and but this was found to be untrue, and scientists have realized that our brains are constantly changing as our experience happens. So, for example, when we are stressed, there are brain changes that are happening with stress reduction. Those changes come back to normal. So this has been demonstrated in animals, where when animals are stressed, when they are confined to some kind of cage, they get all stressed out, and then they can detect, scientists can see changes in their neurons, and then they come back to normal when these animals are released and they are no longer stressed. So same thing happens in terms of learning something. If someone is learning a musical instrument or something, changes happen, changes in preferences, self-control, intentions, and so on. So there's a vast literature on this. And so changes can be things like formation of new neurons, new neural connections being made, cortical remapping, network weakened or lost, and myelogenesis. So if you can understand the terms, don't worry. So it just means that there are all kinds of changes happening in the brain as a result of our first-person experiences. So, and mindfulness practices also bring about changes in the brain. So there are things like gray matter density changes, functional connectivity changes, and so on. And these changes are linked with improvements in attentional control, improvements in emotional regulation, and improvements in stress, or reductions in stress. And there are lots of studies in this area as well. So, and there are also lots of studies in mindfulness in terms of changes that are happening. I just picked this one also because it's a relatively recent article, and it looked at, and it's a systematic review article. So they looked at a molecule called, a very important molecule called the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and how mindfulness has an effect. It seemed to increase this molecule, which plays a crucial role in the plasticity of the brain. So now I talked about the brains changing all the time, and as a result of our first-person experiences, and physiological changes also happen in our body as a result of stressful experiences. So, so this is a meta-analysis that looked at stress-related changes that happen in inflammatory markers. So inflammatory markers are associated with negative health consequences. So, so this is just the time after this stress was introduced, and these are the increases in the molecules of inflammation. So, and what an interesting finding is that physiological changes can reverse as a result of mindfulness practices. So this is this study was done in people with general anxiety disorder, and here was again a randomized trial where there were people. One group received the intervention of mindfulness-based stress reduction, and the other group received stress management education, and they found a significant change or reduction in inflammatory markers in the mindfulness group compared to the control group. So if we talk in practical terms, so if we experience stress, we might even feel it in our body, the physiologic. So something is happening, maybe the heart beats faster, and we might feel some kind of sensation. So, and also, so when stress happens, there's the activation of what is known as the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So this is one of the main stress response pathways in the body. So all kinds of physiological changes happening, and this can lead to biological clinical manifestations. So now if someone ruminates on this stress, let's say somebody insulted you and then you feel really bad and stressed out, and then you ruminate on it, that person, what a terrible person, and how he always like this, and what if this happens, and keep thinking and thinking about that, then this pathway or the it feeds this sequence of events. So and then all these activities, the physiological changes keep happening. But if you bring mindfulness into this equation, so and mindfulness reduces rumination, and so then this it prevents this breaks this sequence of events happening. Yeah, so this is an article that I published on these types of things. So if someone wants to look it up, we can do it. Okay, so moving on now. So I talked about how we study how different parts of the brain gets activated as a result of different mental states. So as a result of investigating this way, researchers have found different functional networks in the brain. So they have given names to them, and I have listed some of them here: default mode network, central executive network, salience network, and so on. So out of these networks, these are two important networks that we will talk about. So default mode network gets activated when we ruminate on thoughts, get entangled in thoughts. I talked about rumination earlier. And then the central executive network gets activated when when we are engaged in an attention-directed task or attention demanding task. So, so when someone does mindfulness meditation, the default mode network activity goes down. So this, and also the central executive network activity goes higher. So these are also told to be anti-correlated. So they go in different directions. So because of this knowledge, researchers have used this understanding to direct people to meditate. So, for example, in this article, it talks about how participants. So here in this article, in this publication, participants were instructed to practice mindfulness, which resulted in a state with default mode network activation lower than the central executive network. So, so how is this done? So I'll show you how it's done. So it's called neurofeedback. So you are giving the person some feedback in terms of whether they are doing the meditation correctly. So, so the participant is here inside this MRI scanner, and his or her brain activity is sent to the part of the machine where they analyze it and see whether they analyze the activity levels of the default mode network and the central executive network, and then they have set the machine in such a way that if the default mode network activity is higher, then this white dot moves down, and if it is the other way around, if rumination is low and the default mode network activity is lower, then this goes up. So it's here the participants are asked to practice mindfulness to move the white dot up. So that means their brain networks are activating in the correct way. So let's move on. So now we don't need machines to meditate, because as this article is about teaching mindfulness to people who had severe chronic schizophrenia for many years, in fact, and they found that 8 months of mindfulness meditation significantly reduced hallucination and delusion scores in chronic schizophrenia patients. So this shows the value of meditation in mental health treatments. Okay, so I just thought I should mention loving kindness meditation, because it's a lot of research is done on this meditation, and their researchers have found that it enhances positive emotions, so biases. So to get over biases, this loving kindness meditation is extremely helpful. So now let's see a summary of mindfulness and meditation research findings that we talked about. Mindfulness is an ability that can be cultivated. Mindfulness is linked to mental and physical well-being. Rumination plays a causal and a maintenance role in psychiatric problems. Mindfulness practices can significantly reduce rumination. Mindfulness results in healthy structural and functional changes in the brain. Mindfulness results in beneficial physiological changes. And so as a result of this, because it's because of all the benefits, it's currently used to in depression treatment, anxiety, stress, insomnia, addictions, psychosis, pain, hypertension, weight control, healthy aging, athletic performance, you name it, they use it. So in hospitals, schools, prisons, workplaces, it's used as a therapeutic agent. So now all this time, we talked about scientific understandings of meditation, mindfulness, and some of the neuroscientific findings. And all those are from the third person perspective. So, so the Buddhist wisdom teachings are understood from the first person perspective. So let's take a look at Buddhist wisdom teachings right now. So the goal of Buddhist teachings is to understand the nature of human experience and uses the first person perspective. So, so let's consider the experiences of this person sitting here. And first, we need to know that all of us, each one of us, experience the world from the first person perspective. We see, we hear, we smell, we taste, we feel sad, we feel happy, we have thoughts relating to the past, present, and the future. All that happens from the first person perspective. So let's try to think of the experiences that this person is having here. So he would be seeing, he sees these mountains, might see a plane go by, he has hearing, maybe some bird sounds or people talking in the surroundings. He might have smells coming from the water here, maybe foul smells. If he's eating something, he might have a taste, or that could could be a taste lingering in his mouth. And he might have all kinds of body sensations, maybe the wind blowing against his face, or the deck here, the wooden deck he's sitting on, he might feel some sensations there. And all kinds of mental events can happen too. So, for example, if he sees people walking in this mountain area, he might think, I should go there. He might have that intention. If a plane flies by, that might result in some kind of thought, and that thought might lead to some memory that relates to something that happened when he went on a plane journey somewhere. So it might even create some kind of emotion. So these are all, so there can be all kinds of thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and intentions, and so on. So these are all first person experiences, excuse me, someone might have. Can you think of anything else? So there aren't anything else. So these are the experiences we are experienced moment by moment. So what I'm talking to you here comes from the Buddha's teachings, so from the sutras and so on. So, there are 6 ways that thoughts come to our mind as a result of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touch sensations. Or a thought can come as a stimulus-independent thought, that is just suddenly remembering something. And those all those triggers can go into all kinds of feelings and perceptions and intentions and so on. So, and we also can talk in terms of the past, present, and the future. What is unique about the present moment is that all the sensory experiences happen in the present moment. So these are the present moment experiences that this person is having now. So let's say before he came here, he was at a meeting or something with some other people. And at that time, there would have been seeing, hearing, all kinds of sensory experiences, but they can only come up as thoughts right now. And if he's going to have a meal afterwards, after he sits here for a while, if he goes for a meal, the tastes and the smells, they can only come up as thoughts now. And if and when the future comes up, he would have those sensory experiences. So our present moment experiences are constantly changing. So now, if this person happens to be a scientist or a neuroscientist, he might even have thoughts about how the brain works. And also he might think about his internal organs, the kidneys, as mental images, the lungs, where the brain is located. So those things come up as thoughts when you consider first-person experiences. Okay. So now if we consider a group of, let me see. Yeah, so I have a summary here. All of us experience the world from the first-person perspective. Mental events get generated in 6 ways: through input from the 5 senses or as a stimulus-independent thought. We experience only one thought moment at a time. We think that everything happens all the time, but if you observe with mindfulness, you can see that there's only one thought moment, but it happens so fast, and that's why we think everything happens at the same time. 5 sense experiences are only experienced in the present moment, as I explained. Past experiences shape our present moment thoughts. So, for example, seeing a food item can result in different feelings in people. If people are conditioned due to past experience, if someone really likes that food, then a pleasant feeling can come up, and if they don't like, then unpleasant feeling can come up. Same, all our experiences are like that. Seeing a dog, if we generally like dogs due to past experiences, we would have a pleasant feeling, whereas when we see a dog, if we don't like, then there's unpleasant feeling. So past experiences shape our present moment thoughts. Okay. So moving on, let me see. I have a different. Okay, so let's keep going. To understand these present moment experiences, we use different types of meditation practices. So there are two major meditation practices. I'm sure most of you may know of. It's the focused attention meditation practices like samatha, and open monitoring meditation practices like vipassana. So focused attention is very useful. Cultivating focused attention is useful for open monitoring, because if you're constantly drifting into thoughts, then it's hard to understand your present moment experiences through vipassana. So in the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, they don't use the word samatha and vipassana. They use the word focused attention and open monitoring meditation. So let's think of a group of people interacting with each other. So from what we learned, so if someone is talking to another person, the other person experiences it as a hearing moment. So each person experiences the world through their five senses and mental events. So if someone talks, there's a hearing moment followed maybe by a thought, and so on. So and they also have the present moment, past, and the future, constantly changing experiences. So scientists also interact and come up with discoveries. So third-person understanding, so empirical knowledge, is arrived through observations, experimentation, and dialogue. And they come up with science comes up with shared understandings related to objects, things, and phenomena where observations need to be replicated. So that's how science comes up with all types of inventions or findings related to the natural world. So, but even as scientists discover things, their present moment, each of their present moment experiences change. So each of them have their first person experiences relating to the past, present, and the future. So even when we are doing, when someone is doing research into the brain, or trying to understand the brain, the researchers' first-person experiences constantly change, and the participants' first-person experiences also constantly change. So, sorry, click. Okay. So neuroscientific understandings of Buddhist. Now we are going to talk about neuroscientific understandings and Buddhist wisdom teachings, how they relate to each other. So now when we look at all what we talked about, the neuroscientific evidence does not contradict at all the teachings of the Buddha. And actually, it brings us more confidence or saddha into the teachings of the Buddha, in terms of the teachings of the Buddha. So, for example, we saw that ruminating thoughts have negative health consequences, and it brings about changes in the brain, and it brings about changes in body physiology, and these things reverse when with meditation practices as well. So it's quite remarkable. And the Buddha's in the Salayatanika Sutta, the Buddha says, for him, infatuated, attached, confused, not remaining focused in their drawbacks, the 5 clinging aggregates head towards future accumulation. So his bodily disturbances and mental disturbances grow. His bodily torments and mental torments grow. His bodily distresses and mental distresses grow. So, so this is the Buddha is talking about the rumination that happens in us. And in Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha says, when a monk attains inappropriately, unarisen fermentations arise and arisen fermentations increase. When a monk attains appropriately, unarisen fermentations do not arise and arisen fermentations are abandoned. So fermentations here means ashrava. So attending inappropriately and attending appropriately refers to wise attention, or yoniso manasikara, as we call it in Buddhist teachings. So, and very interestingly, this article looked at different types of the two types of attention. One being the mindful attention, the other normal attention, computer-based attention, for example. So what this study did was to ask people, the randomized study, one group engaged in mindful attention practices, and the other group did computer-based attention. So what they did was to look at a series of letters and press a button when they saw an X that was preceded by a letter A. So they have to be very vigilant and watchful to press that button. Was there an X and was it preceded by an A? So, but they developed that attention. But the neural changes related to stress reduction happened only in the mindfulness attention group. So we see that there's a difference in the yoniso manasikara. So, and in the Dveda Vitakta Sutta, the bhikkhus, the Buddha says, bhikkhus, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of desire, then his mind inclines to thoughts of desire. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, then his mind inclines to thoughts of cruelty. So, and this also has psychological research support. I have just listed some references here. Anger rumination intensifies its power, and depressive rumination worsens depressed mood. Mindful observation reduces their power. So we talked about attentional blink and how developing mindfulness increases our ability to attend to moment by moment changes in the mind stream. So this is also very useful for developing insight into our first person experiences. So in the Mahapunam Sutra, it is said, contact is the cause, contact the condition for the delineation of the aggregate of feeling. Contact is the cause, contact is the condition for the delineation of the aggregate of perception. Contact is the cause, contact is the condition for the delineation of the aggregate of fabrication. So contact is a common word that comes up in Buddhist teaching. So for example, in the Hattipadopama Sutta, it talks about contact is about the object, the ear, the organ ear, and attention or conscious engagement coming together for us to experience contact. So when we observe mindfully, to observe that as a result of that sound, that feeling came, and as a result of that result of a seeing experience, that perception happened, and so on. So we can hear some kind of sound right now in the background. So I kind of had an unpleasant feeling in the sense that it was affecting this presentation, but then it goes away. So then it's just that sharp mindfulness can be developed, can be so useful for developing wisdom. And that is demonstrated, that it's the ability to cultivate mindful, to attend to moment by moment experience through mindfulness was demonstrated by the attentional blink experiments. And also we saw the emotional blink, how people get caught up in those emotional images, and I'm not able to notice the cards that followed, the letters or the images that followed. So we can see that mindfulness practice helps us to let go of these emotions and observe the present moment experiences as they come. So what we talked about also connect to what is referred to as conventional reality and ultimate reality. So scientific findings are about happen in conventional reality. So it's about our conditioning that has happened. So from the days we are young, we are told that this is a tree, this are the people, this is the world, and all those things have been conditioned to us, and we think in terms of people, places, things, objects, and so on. So that's the conditioned world, and to understanding ultimate reality is about understanding the unconditioned. So scientific findings are always changing. So because they're changing in terms of new observations and new discoveries. So, for example, the geocentric model of the universe was replaced by a heliocentric model. I'm sure most of you know about that. Not just big things like that, but even little things. Like all kinds of discoveries. We might hear on the radio that coffee is good for you. New research has shown that. And then a few weeks or months later, they might say coffee is actually bad for you. New research has informed us and so on. So things are changing, the discoveries. But Buddhist wisdom teachings do not change. It's akaliko when we talk about the attributes of the Dhamma. Because beings are born and they die and they are reborn in different realms of existence, and but these laws relating to their wandering in the samsara, they don't change. So okay, so also scientific understandings also point to the continuous change in everything. For example, physics, the discoveries in physics show that matter can be described as particles or waves and so on. And even studies relating to our body has found that there are thousands of metabolic reactions happening all the time in our body. There's constant change, and also there's constant exchange of material. Oxygen comes inside our bodies. We take food from outside, and there's constant recycling and change. And even the Buddha described that there is no difference between particles outside in the external world and particles that make up our bodies. And the Buddhist teachings also talk about our mind, the consciousness element that breaks up and perishes almost as soon as it arises, where the smallest possible unit of experience, an instant of consciousness, is millions of times smaller than the flicker of an eyelid. These units originate, remain, and pass away, where there is no unchanging entity that can be pinned down and labeled as a self. Okay, so I also thought of just talking very briefly about the question of free will in neuroscience. So it's an often talked about subject. So I took this image from a YouTube clip called Libe Experiment is Free Will Just an Illusion. So what happens is when there's someone if somebody is asked to press the button whenever they feel like it, and also to record the time that they made this decision to press the button. So what the researchers have found is that the activity of the brain happens a few seconds before the person says that I have made the decision. So this observation had led neuroscientists to think that that we don't have free will and that everything is biological. So now we can look at this issue from this conventional point of view and the ultimate reality point of view. From the conventional point of view, we say that we make decisions. Now, you all the participants here, you made the decision to come to this presentation. So now, even if you take this person, let's say when he was coming to this lab, someone he really trusts told him, "Oh, don't go there. That's a fake lab or something like that," and then he won't even go there. So we'll say that he decided his free will was that he didn't want to go. So in the conventional sense, we generally consider that we have free will. But when we talk about ultimate realities, it's about the constantly changing phenomena, causes and conditions leading to thoughts and our behavior. So, for example, the fact that you came here to attend this presentation would have had so many causes involved. You could list them. There'll be many causes that would have resulted in you coming for the presentation. And this, if we consider this person whose friend told him don't go, so that becomes a cause for him to not come. So in Buddhist teachings and the commentaries, they talk about the causal laws, the niyama dhamma, the 5 niyamas, biological laws, physical laws, psychological laws, karmic laws, and spiritual laws, and so on. So we can talk about those causes and conditions resulting in thoughts and behavior. So and also when we consider the question of whether a person has free will, we are making the assumption that there's solid entity, the unchanging entity called a person, making a decision. So, and that doesn't hold true when we consider that everything is changing. What makes up the person's body, the outside world, the thoughts, and so on. There's no unchanging entity there. Let me see whether they. Okay, so in the Paguna Sutta, in the Buddha talks about nutrients that are needed for the sustenance of beings. And I won't go into details here because we are almost running out of time. So Venerable Paguna asked the Buddha, who makes contact? So we talked about what contact is. So it's sometimes translated as sense impression. So who is having this sense impression? And the Buddha says, not a valid question. The Beloved One said, I don't say makes contact. If I were to say makes contact, then who makes contact would be a valid question. But I don't say that. When I don't say that, the valid question is, from what as a requisite condition comes contact? And the valid answer is, from the six sense media as a requisite condition comes contact. From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling. So he goes on like that to describe many other phenomena. So we come to almost the end of the session. So when we compare, so in summary, when we compare science and Buddhism, science is about the third person perspective. It involves communicating, labeling, analyzing, and reaching consensus regarding how various phenomena operate in the world. And this leads to scientific facts and information, and that, as we said, can be very, very useful. I came across some recent research in neuroscience where they are able to decode brain signals and this discovery has led paralyzed individuals to communicate. So they decode their brain signals and translate it into speech. So the paralyzed individual can communicate with the outside world. So there are practical applications even in neuroscience. And in Buddhism, it's all about first-person perspective experience. So experientially understanding first-person experiences, which involve constantly changing sense impressions and mental events. So attending to our first-person experiences and cultivating wisdom through these observations. So, and this leads to self-knowledge and wisdom. And so we can see that first-person and third-person perspectives represent two distinct but equally valid ways of understanding the world and our experiences in it. So first-person perspective understandings or experiential understandings gradually lead one to enlightenment through the understanding of Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, understanding the three characteristics of existence, understanding dependent origination, and so on. So, as stated in the Dhammapada, you yourself must strive. The Buddhas only point the way. Those meditative ones who tread the path are released from the bondage of Mara, from the Dhammapada. So I think I am done with the presentation. So Professor Madhuma Bandara, you could go ahead.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Madam Karunamuni, for that very scholarly presentation. I think for me, I have heard such a scholarly treatment of the subject after a long time. Now, in order to proceed with the rest of our program, we like to invite Professor Premsiri. But before that, let me say, you all can ask questions from Madam Karunamani from Sinhala or English, whatever it may be. And also, I must remind you that you can press the hand mark at the bottom of the the icon bar, uh, when you want to ask a question, there are some questions already came to the chat box. We will take them up gradually, but as a start, we decided to have a discussant who is very knowledgeable in this subject. For this purpose, to be very frank, I couldn't find anybody better than Professor Premsiri. I have known him for very long time. He had the first class in Pali from Peradeniya University, and then he went to Cambridge to study philosophy. That is, I think we had long evenings with debates and so on. And then, of course, he did his PhD at Hawaii University. And to be very brief, if you ask me for the top 10% Buddhist scholars in the world, I would not hesitate to include him in that list. So let me invite Professor Premsiri to do the analysis of the paper.
I am very grateful to Professor Madhuma Bandara for giving me this opportunity to participate in this webinar and give an appropriate response to this very interesting and informative presentation that was delivered to us by Madam Nandini Karunamani. I am very thankful to her and very grateful to her for that large body of information that was passed on to us. And it was a very enlightening experience to listen to the neuroscientific aspects of meditation. Meditation has been associated with religious practice and thought to belong to religion that lies outside the sphere of empirical science. Those who are committed to the experimental approach of scientific investigation had for a long time considered religion as lying entirely outside the sphere of empirical science, considering the fundamental doctrines of religious systems as consisting of mere beliefs that cannot be investigated for their truth or falsity. We are aware of the position taken by the philosophical tradition that became very popular as logical positivism in the Western world, relegating religious utterances to the sphere of the nonsensical or factually meaningless use of language. This is how they would have looked at even the Buddhist teachings at that time. Buddhism has been associated with religion, and as a consequence of this association, a large body of Buddhist teachings related to the psychological reality concerning human experience have been dismissed as belonging to the sphere of the fanciful and the imaginative. It is undeniable that Buddhism has developed through many centuries from its inception nearly 2,600 years ago into a complete system of religion, branching off into several schools of Buddhist thought. In this process, there has been an intermixture of myth and legend, the use of figurative language, and the like. However, the Buddha, the founder of the Buddhist way of life, insisted that there are very profound realities related to the sphere of the human mind that could be experienced and discovered by means of a systematic training of the mind. There is a core of psychological reality that could be derived from what has been preserved in the traditional scriptures of the teachings of the Buddha. As we found in the presentation that we just listened to, those findings are being now confirmed by neuroscientific studies. The realities the Buddha discovered relating to the human mind came to be referred to as Dhamma, which signified the nature of things. So Dhamma refers to the nature of things. He insisted that what he discovered as Dhamma is experientially verifiable by anyone who commits oneself to the practices he made known. It was this characteristic of it that came to be expressed in the traditional description of the quality of Dhamma as being sanditthiko, that is, immediately observable. And akaliko, a second meaning that I would like to propose for akaliko, is producing consequences without delay. I think sometimes it's interpreted as not restricted to a particular time, but another interpretation is that it produces consequences without delay. Ehipassiko. This is actually a term which can be associated with the current term in the sciences, that is verifiability. It has this quality of verifiability. Someone can be invited to come and see and check whether it is in accordance with reality or whether it is not in conformity with reality. And it is said to be open-aiko, leading to the intended goal. So if we have a particular goal to achieve, and according to the Buddha, the goal to be achieved is overcoming the unsatisfactory state of affairs that we are experiencing. The unsatisfactory predicament of what we call suffering is the goal of Buddhism. Leading to the intended goal in that sense. And pachattang veditabbo vinyuhi, that is also an interesting description of what he taught. That is, ought to be known or could be known by intelligent persons intersubjectively, or each one in one's own person. And I think that is what the speaker just now referred to as the first person perspective. However, with the development of the so-called objective approach of material science, a philosophical tendency developed to dismiss the reality of the inner experience of humans. It was thought that whatever is real and true can only be known as an empirically observable object. This position came to be strongly held by the school of psychologists called the behaviorists, who argued that there is no reality called mind, and all our mental concepts can be logically reduced to observable patterns of behavior. So they actually wanted to get rid of the concept of consciousness, which is so much valued in Buddhist thought. It also influenced the philosophy of mind that came to be expounded by the mid 20th century philosophers like Gilbert Ryle, who maintained that all mental conduct concepts could be analyzed or analyzed in terms of or reduced to what is observable in the behavioral expression of the humans. The view that there is an inner reality called the mind was rejected, downgrading that view as the dogma of the ghost in the machine. This extreme approach came to be challenged by the cognitive psychologists who pointed out that to conceive of the human being as a mere stimulus response mechanism does not do justice to the reality of the human condition. It is to the credit of this approach that it made possible to bring into focus the significance of the inner psychological reality, transforming the restricted approach of behaviorism advocated as a theory of learning and human development. Moreover, it has led in recent times to the kindling in the Western world tremendous interest in experimenting with the Buddhist methods of cultivating the mind and achieving a greater degree of human well-being through the adoption of Buddhist contemplative practices, as we noticed in the present discussion. It is to be noted that Buddhism has not approached the reality of the human condition by falling into ideological extremes. There have been attempts in the history of human thought to reduce the entire reality of the human condition to material phenomena by those who took the materialistic extreme, and to mental phenomena by those who adopted the idealistic extreme. According to the Buddhist identification of these extremes, one was that the body is identical with the life principle, as expressed in the Buddhist language, tang jiwang tang sarira. And the other was that the body and the life principle are totally different, anyang jiwang, anyang sarira. Buddhism has consistently avoided falling into these two extremes. And Buddhism has also avoided the position that was presented in what came to be known as Cartesian dualism. That is the dualism taught by the well-known philosopher René Descartes, and also referred to by Ryle as the dogma of the ghost in the machine. So, from my point of view, Buddhism does not conform to the dogma of the ghost in the machine. That is the reason why the Buddha did not wish to conform to either of the two positions that were commonly held as the only two possible alternatives to explain the human reality. Buddhism expressly rejected the dualistic position that there is an eternal entity called the soul or the self, which is indestructible, attached to the destructible material body. The Buddha left the question about the absolute identity or absolute separation of body and the life principle unanswered. He left that question unanswered because he thought that the reality of the situation could not be accurately communicated through commitment to either of these positions. At this point, I wish to bring in an interesting account of the Buddha presented in one of his discourses called the Vimangsaka Sutta in the Pali Canon. Here he points out that if anyone intends to find out whether the Buddha was rightly enlightened or not, one could engage in an investigation of the observable behavior of the Buddha through the perceptions of the eye and the perceptions of the ear. Vimangsakena bhikkhuna tathagatepi samannesana katabba samma sambuddho va no va vijnanaya, in order to know whether he is fully enlightened or not. Now, he defined enlightenment as the total elimination and destruction of greed or greedy tendencies, hateful tendencies, and the tendency to have a deluded mind. What the Buddha called upon others to objectively investigate was the actual transformation of behavior in his own case. Other persons could, if they so wished, test the claims of the Buddha through objective observation. The Buddha claimed to be rightly and fully enlightened or awakened in the sense that he had gone through a radical transformation of his inner nature, which may be objectively tested by an external observer by adopting rigorous methods of testing. He requested such observation to be done as thoroughly as possible, not confining it to just a few observed instances. For it is possible for a person to resort to deception. However, if a person's behavior is observed over a considerable length of time, in variable situations, it becomes possible to confirm whether the claims are genuine. To come to an objective judgment about another person's character, the Buddha proposed this as an effective method. He claimed that he had gone through a process of transformation involving the eradication of people's inner states called greed, hatred, and delusion, and the truthfulness of this claim could be tested by the observation of his bodily and verbal behavior. However, the reality of this transformation was for him a form of self-knowledge or introspective understanding. That is what we understood as the first person perspective. I believe that in the context of this discussion, a vivid description of the manner in which a series of bodily activity is triggered by the mind, by the initial arousal of the emotion of fear presented in the Buddhist canonical text called Mahanidesa, is likely to be closely relevant. According to this description, anger is a complex process consisting of both mental and physical elements. The initial stage of the process is conceived primarily as a mental one, a disturbed state of the mind. It is a kind of mental displeasure, anattamanata chittas, as described in this context, directly and experientially felt at the initial stage of the process itself. Buddhism does not make the mistake of identifying anger as a simple entity. Anger is a complex series of events which proceed from the mind with an initial thought as its forerunner. The Nirdesa says that sometimes anger manifests itself only as a disturbance of a stirring of the mind, but it could manifest itself in more violent forms or physical behavior, such as the utterance of abusive words and the acquisition of harmful weapons to inflict injury upon one's opponent. When anger develops to the highest intensity, it involves even disregard for one's own life. One would kill one's opponent and also commit suicide. During the time of the Buddha, techniques for directly observing the workings of the human brain as the source of bodily and verbal activity was not possible. Nevertheless, it was clearly understood that inner psychological processes that could be described in terms of introspective observation were present in instances in which human beings exhibited any behavior, cognitive or emotive. However, with the development of modern scientific technology, we have reached a stage enabling us to directly observe the source of all behavior in the activity of the human brain. The significant outcome of this is that those descriptions of the inner reality of experience at the level of ordinary sensory activity, as well as in the scheme of contemplative experiences belonging to the sphere of mental culture associated with meditative absorption, jhanas, are not mere fanciful and imaginative utterances, but are descriptions, respectively, of the inner reality of the sensory process and the gradual transformation of experience through self-direction for the achievement of a higher level of well-being. The contemplative practices adopted by the Buddha were known to many of his contemporaries, and the Buddha could be credited with the contribution he made in putting them into as precise as possible verbal formulations. We could refer to the Buddhist description of the scheme of contemplative absorption referred to above to understand the experiential content of those attainments from the first person perspective. The first attainment of contemplative experience is described as one resulting from a person's distancing of oneself from engagement with sensuous desires, vivicca, and distancing oneself from ethically unwholesome mental associations, that is, vivicca akusale dhamme, because Buddha looked at most of these emotive states as from an ethical point of view. But focusing one's mind on the basis of a chosen object for attention so that one's initial and sustained thought activity is tied to that object, savitakkang savichara, bringing about an experience of joy and happiness born out of that kind of mental distancing was called Viveka Japiti Sukha, a kind of joy and happiness that arises due to the mental distancing from unwholesome thoughts and objects. At the second stage, one could suspend the initial and sustained thought activity and attain a pleasant experience of joy and happiness born of a composed mind. So this is described as samadhijapeti sukha, a sense of joy and happiness based on the composure of the mind. At the third and fourth stages, one could strengthen the mental attainment referred to as equanimity, overcoming the dichotomy of pleasure and pain. And one could actually get obsessed with pleasurable feeling itself. So the Buddha advocated the cultivation of equanimity in order to overcome that possibility. It was said that the human mind could be moved away systematically into newly conceptualized realms of experience, described as the experience of infinity of space, the experience of the infinity of consciousness, the sphere of neither sense cognition nor nonsense cognition, and even a kind of absorption in which there is the total disappearance or cessation of sense cognition and sensation of any kind. And actually, as the highest attainment that one can achieve through contemplation was considered as a total cessation of all experience, the Nirodha. The description of the contemplative experience of the person as one proceeds in the attainment of these hierarchical levels of contemplative absorption, ascending to the higher from the lower, refers to a radical transformation of the mental content. At the time they were presented in the first person perspective, due to the fact that the technological developments for observing the corresponding brain processes were not known. However, the advocates of such experiences considered them to be intersubjectively verifiable. So at that time, only a few bodily changes could be experienced, but not the activity at the level of the brain. The appreciable contribution of modern neuroscientific methods of observation is that it has made it possible to engage in observations of the relevant transformation objectively from the third person perspective. This has resulted in the dismissal of the mistaken view that such descriptions relating to the outcomes of the contemplative development of the mind belong to the sphere of the mythical, the fanciful, and the imaginative, having no basis in reality. As pointed out in the presentation, the contemplative practices traditionally known in Buddhism lead to observable transformation of the processes and even the constitution of the human brain. Humans have the capacity to regulate the brain processes through voluntary and willful intervention. Humans are not to be seen as pure automata, with all their behavior being determined by the brain or the neurological processes. Neuroscience has confirmed the reality of neuroplasticity and the possibility of the humans to redirect the brain processes and establish new circuits in the brain, effectively bringing about behavioral change. However, Buddhism is emphatic on the role of the human mind, which is signified by the three nearly synonymous terms, chitta, mano, and vijnana, as giving direction to all body and mental processes. The question to be answered is whether the mind is something independent of the brain or merely a byproduct of the brain. It is my contention that Buddhism does not intend in any way to identify the mind with any part of the body, not even with the brain. I am inclined to consider the Buddhist concept of nama rupa, the psychophysical organism. I think that is a proper way of rendering nama rupa, as including what is signified by the brain. While considering what is signified by the above mentioned terms, chitta, mano, and vijnana, as being in some sense functioning independently. That is how I would interpret the description of the causal process governing human existence in the Mahanidana Sutta of the Digha Nikaya, which says Namarupa Pachya Vijnanam, that is dependent upon the psychophysical organism, arises consciousness. And Vijnana Pachya Namarupam, dependent upon consciousness, arises the psychophysical organism. Life is supposed to go on as long as this interdependence goes on. And there is no indication that consciousness is reducible to the psychophysical being. So that is what I had to say in this connection. And I think it has some relevance to the presentation made by Nandini. Thank you very much.
Professor Madhum Bandara, your mic is mute.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Professor Premsiri. I think your analysis is equally scholarly and also contains a lot of experience in working in this field for a long time. I think for a layman, it may even appear a little difficult to comprehend. So I would like to open the floor now for discussion and let me speak a few words in Sinhala. අපේ හාමුදුරුවනේ අසාගෙන සිටින සියලු දෙනාගෙන් අවසර මේ ඕනෑම ප්‍රශ්නයක් මහාචාර්ය ප්‍රේමසිරිගෙන් හරි මැඩම් කරුණාමුණිගෙන් හරි අපට සිංහලෙනුත් අහන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් සමහරක් වචන මම ඇත්තටම දන්නේ නැහැ මේ නියුරෝසයන්ස් කියන එකට සිංහල වචනේ. අපේ මහාචාර්ය චන්න අපිත් එක්ක ඉන්නවා තාම ස්නායු විද්‍යාව. එහෙම හරිද ප්‍රොෆෙසර් චන්න?
No, I'm a surgeon. Just say surgeon, don't worry. Charlie White worry.
අපිට අවශ්‍ය පරිදි එතුමාව එකතු කරගත්ත හැකි මේ සාකච්ඡාවේදී දැනට මේ මැඩම් කරුණා මුනිගෙන් අහන්න මම කැමතියි මේගේ මොකක් හරි ප්‍රතිචාරය කියලා මේ මහාචාර්ය ප්‍රේමසිරි කියපු කාරණා ගැන.
Thank you very much, Dr. Premasiri, for your thoughtful and very relevant comments. I would like to get the printout of that, in fact, to send to some people. So it's really good. Thank you for that.
Thank you, madam. I would also like to invite some of you who are listening to contribute to this discussion, particularly our Venerable Balangoda Ananda Chandrakirti Thero, who is in charge of meditation practice and teaching at the Bhikkhu University of Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes, Professor. I listened. That is very important lecture for us. Anyhow, if we can arrange again another topic related to this subject, I think that's also very important for the people who likes this subject.
Okay, thank you. There is one question in the chat box. You can see it
Okay.
for yourself.
Yeah.
And perhaps you can read the question and then try to analyze it.
Sure. Let me see. I can find it.
On the right-hand side of the screen,
Yeah. I found it once, but now it's gone again. But I think he's asking about a specific study, how mindfulness can bring about changes in crime rates and stuff like that. So something related to a study that it was done in Israel, which reduced violence. So I'm not very familiar with this particular article, but there are lots of studies, thousands of studies done in the area of mindfulness. So it's possible that these are valid findings. So, did I answer your question?
If he is listening, let him. It is
okay, so he put thumbs up.
Yeah. The one who wrote this to the chat box, if he is still in the audience, please.
I think you put a thumbs up. I saw a thumbs up thing, so I probably answered it.
Yeah. Okay. There is another question coming from, I think, one of our reverences. Hello. Okay, then I will just randomly move into various people, and I can see Bhante Yogavachara is with us. It is indeed a privilege for us to listen to such people. Bhante, do you have any queries or comments?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very much.
Well, I very appreciate the talks of both of the speakers. They were very informative on the subject. From my own study and practice of the Dhamma theoretically, as well as intensive meditation practice over 40 years, I basically, agree and understand everything that they're following. I mean, they are explaining about the teachings of the Buddha and how the teachings of the Buddha go far beyond Western psychology to really get to the source of consciousness, and also to the source of how our mind creates the karma that helps keep our mind bound in these repetitive patterns of greed, hatred, and delusion, and how the sense of self created. Now, I find that the most interesting part and deepest aspect of the Buddhist teaching is about how does this sense of self arise? I mean, you know, when the baby was first born, it didn't have a sense of self. And for maybe 6 months or a year, it didn't have a localized sense of self, like something behind your eyeballs thinking, I am somebody and the world is out there. But then gradually started because of, being attracted to the external objects and learning language. So the mother says, that's daddy, that's mommy, that's a cat. And so the baby's mind starts identifying all these things, and whatever brings it pleasure, it wants those things again. And whatever brings it a painful feeling, it has fear of them coming in the future or try to struggle to get away. And really, that continues the whole life. And then people find themselves as an adult with all these hundreds and millions of karmic bound connections. And every time we react, we strengthen the sense of I, me, and mine that's in the mind. And so it's only through the Buddha's teaching of learning how to restrain our reactions to the development of mindfulness, to the development of the Eightfold Path, which includes Sila, which also includes the right effort. The category of concentration includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And this is what I like to call the Buddha's high technology. The Buddha was high tech for me, especially in terms of the mental process. And he understood it better than anybody, and how we can go directly to the source of that. But you have to develop the concentration first, as the second speaker had mentioned about going through the jhanas. This brings the mind to a perfectly still state and centered in the present moment, that we can then clearly see these impulses arising from the unconscious mind. And then what meditation does, it short circuits the brain process. It short circuits the efferent brain impulses that are going out, so that you have a chance to observe your thoughts and say, is this going to be necessary? Is this going to bring suffering or not? And you have the ability to not repeat it. Now, the ordinary person doesn't have that ability, because it takes a very deep level of mindfulness, concentration, and the wisdom to be able to effectively do that, to reach these levels of purification, as the 4 stages of the liberation. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you, Reverend Sir.
Madhya Bandar sir, excuse me. Our Venerable Kiruma Vimalatissa Thero has raised hand. Shall we give Venerable sir to ask question?
I will take him next. Is there any response to what the Bhante said from Madam Karunamuri or from Professor Premasiri? If you have any response.
Yes, thank you very much, Bhante, for those comments. When you said about how the sense of self is created, in some of the sutras, Buddha talked about the 5 aggregates, and how each aggregate we have perceptions about each aggregate in 4 different ways, in the sense that aggregate is me, aggregate I am inside the aggregate, or there are 4 kinds of things. I can't exactly recall it right now. And then when we have a particular feeling or something, we observe that but is this feeling me, or is this feeling, does it feel like inside me? So am I inside the aggregate, and so on. So thank you. And I just thought of that when you mentioned how it is created. So, and I think there's also a sutta about how little children develop the sense of self later on. At the beginning, they may not have it, but gradually, I forget the name of the sutta. Perhaps Dr. Premasiri might remember.
Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Premasiri, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would like to say something more about the concept of mindfulness.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting saying in the Sutta Nipata, text belonging to the fifth collection of the Pali Canon,
Yeah.
where the question is raised, uh, these unwholesome emotions, which are called asavas. The I like to look at the asavas as the inflowing taints that pollute the mind. So the question is asked: these asavas flow into the mind like swift flowing streams. What is it that actually prevents them from flowing in like that? And it is said, it is mindfulness that does it.
Right. Mindfulness is the satipatthana.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Well,
In Pali or
Satipatthana is
similar?
a method of establishing mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then let me turn to another Reverend Sir from the Bhikkhu University. He is actually the head of Buddhist studies. Uh, can I invite you, sir, to ask any question or make any comments? Hello. Hello. Difficult to reach him. I think there is some problem. He has muted his.
Venerable sir must turn on the mic.
Yeah. How can we ask him to do so? Uh, so
Now,
Excuse me.
now it is okay. Please go ahead.
Okay, I am Reverend Vimaratissa from Bhikkhu University.
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank both presenters, the co-presenter, Ms. Karuna Amuni, and also the reputed professor P.D. Pemasiri, one of our teacher. You both give a very tremendous contribution to the topic. I have a few questions, or we can consider just a comment regarding the presentations. And also, I would like to ask from Nadini. I appreciate and give my heartfelt thanks for your presentation. And also, I would like to ask, do you have any personal experience regarding this matter, what we talk about today? I mean the relationship between the neuroscientific research regarding meditation, because I saw you presented many research articles regarding this field, but I just asked, do you have any personal experience, or are you doing research currently regarding this aspect? And also, the next question is, normally in the Western world, actually they always doing meditation consider for the secular matters. In Buddhism, normally we know that it is seeking some kind of spiritual development, and Buddha, I think the development of mind, the chitta, mano, and vijnana, these three terms we use in Buddhism to denote the mental aspect of individual. So when we consider the meditation and brain, or meditation and mind, I mean the chitta, some kinds, can we reduce the mind into brain? Because the Buddha said development of the mind, I mean the chitta, but the neuroscientific said the experiment regarding the brain. Can you reduce the mind into brain? I think more suitable answer will be given by pretty famous regarding this matter. Is it reasonable to say that, sir? Thank you very much.
There are two questions now. They are very clear and straightforward. Perhaps Professor Premsiri can start and Madam Nandini can join.
Yeah. Yes, actually, can you hear me?
Yeah, very much.
In my presentation itself, I made the point that it is not possible, according to Buddhism, to reduce the mind to the brain.
Yeah.
The question of body mind identity I discussed and pointed out that from the perspective of Buddhism, the mind has some kind of autonomy, or in other words, kind of ability to function on its own. Mm. In the sense that I think it is expressed by this Dhammapada verse, which says, Mano Pubbangama Dhamma, that all mental states are preceded by the mind. So the mind actually is supposed to direct the world. It has the ability to direct the world. Chittena niyati loko. The world can be led by the mind, can be directed by the mind. So that kind of potential is attributed to the faculty called the mind.
Thank you. Nandini, Madam Nandini, do you want
Yes,
to?
thank you. Yeah, so regarding the question of experience, so I have studied science. I have come to this from the scientific stream, where neuroscience is part of science. So, and I also practice meditation, Buddhist meditation, for the last maybe 15 plus years. So, and I do daily meditation, study the sutras and so on. So at one point I was thinking about how these things interrelate to, how the neuroscience understandings and the personal understandings, how they intersect. And that's when I started writing about it, and some of my co-authors are actual neuroscientists. So, and also when I trained as a mindfulness stress reduction teacher, I learned about these changes happening in the brain and so on. So, and in terms of your question about whether the mindfulness is taught in the West for personal development, that's true. But at the same time, people are benefiting from it. They are reducing their stress and also learning a little bit more. Many people feel that there has to be more to the understanding of the mindfulness. So when I teach mindfulness to university students and so on, and when they ask questions, I quote the Buddhist teachings and I tell them how broad they are and how meaningful it is to learn through the frameworks of Buddhist teachings rather than simply doing it to enhance your life. So I hope I answered
Yeah,
you.
thank you. I think that's very clear. Perhaps we are getting drawn into this neuroscience part. As a surgeon and a medical person, Professor Channa, do you have anything to say about this?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay. Nandini,
By the way, he was our professor of surgery. Uh, of course, one of the best we had. Right? Okay, Janna.
hi, Madhavandan, hi,
Yeah.
Nandini. I am looking at this whole subject from a point of view of a medical person who has got a biological background. Right.
Right.
The human being brought onto the earth is an evolutionary product.
Yeah.
He is dependent on a whole lot of reflexes. They are all done as the human brain evolved to sustain his survival and procreate his genus. There is no question about that. Now, uh, when he joins the society later on in the evolutionary scale, joins the society, he has to uh, limit himself or look after himself in that society. And if he has to look after himself in that society and survive in the complexity of the current society, he has to develop a self. That self has been shown by neuroplasticity to exist. It starts when you're 2 or 3, and after that it gradually improves to become when it changes occur very soon in the earlier parts of the early years of your life, but becomes progressively more difficult laterally. But the neuroplasticity can exist till the latter part. Now, they have shown by functional MRI in neuroscience that uh, by this, what she showed last time, the default mode network is basically self reference. And as the person practices meditation, there is a uncinate fasciculus that develops a tract to the amygdala, which is the center of emotion, to curtail and reduce the effectivity of the default mode network. That is through the central executive pathway. And the central executive pathway is what Bhavana does for you. When you practice the central executive pathway by Vipassana, the DMN, that is the default mode network, attenuates. And when it attenuates, you can go into what is called a state of mind, which becomes a trait. You can get into that anytime you want, and ultimately, it leads you to the uh, any what you might call non-karma situation. That is, you don't involve yourself with any karma activity, and that has also been differentiated further by two groups. I don't know if I'm going off my track, but what is called the narrative self and the minimal self. The narrative self is what we find in even the arahats find it difficult to the latter stages of their life. I am writing a book on this technology. It is based on the medical uh, aspect, looking at it from Buddhist philosophy and neuroscience from a medical point of view. So it may not agree with, it is more what is might call a materials way, because there is enough data now to show that the self is really a cerebral construct from the neurons per se. The neurons, I don't want to go into detail. I have written it in my book. Neurons have been identified, the locations have been identified by functional memory. So I find this data is always available on the net. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chan. I think when you consider the standard and quality of this discussion, I don't feel like bringing it to a close, but now we are very close to the time allocated to this purpose. So let me add my own little bit. I mean, I'm rather learning from you all, not a student, but kind of trying to understand what you all are saying. The basic question finally raised was of great importance. That is whether the mind can be reduced to just to the brain. The answer appears to be on the negative side. And then the question comes, what is what is mind, of course? Is it a force of nature, another force of nature? And I do not know how to tie this with the evolutionary theory, but this force has given humans added ability to survive and proceed. That is how I understand it. And also, if the mind is, you know, mind cannot be reduced to the brain, but then, of course, the mind is associated with the body. Durang gamang ekacharang asarirang guhasayang. So is it the sleeping place for the mind, the body and the brain, or anything else? I think our technological advancement in recent times is changing the world at a very rapid rate. We can reach the depths of mind or depths of the brain, which could not have been reached earlier. So we are going into an era of artificial intelligence, and it is revolutionizing the way we teach. We are having examinations online. These things we have not experienced during our lifetime. So I have very positive thinking about more and more revelations would come through the application of modern technology. That's just a feeling of mine. With those words, I hope it is not the end of the story, but would you mind if we bring this wonderful discussion to a close? And also, I think our technical person, Mr. Venur Lakshman, he has taken action to record this, and we can have this in the YouTube uh, for those who missed this opportunity of being part of the discussion today. Um, so, if there are no other technical or organizational issues, uh, Reverend Balanguda Amdini, uh, shall we close this for the day?
Yes, I think if we have enough time, some two monks I can see here raise hand, Venerable Gomila, or do we have enough time, or we are going to close?
No, we are going to close now because we are half an hour behind the
Okay.
schedule.
Okay,
So
sir.
what we can do is that we can organize a similar, I mean, let this be the beginning, and
Yes, sir.
have discussions continuously, a series of things, which
Yeah,
may open the passage for the Bhikkhu University
yeah.
to go into hard research, and I hope. I mean, that's my own dream. We must
Of
have
course, this is the open door for the new subject because
yeah.
this is for the new area in meditational way to understanding about neuro connection between the meditation and neuroscience, connection between the meditation and neuroscience and Buddhism. This is the very important side. I think this is the open door for the many researchers can start their research and investigations.
Thank you, Reverend Sir. Although I did not mention, our Reverend Sir is one of the top disciples of Balangoda Anandamaitri Hamdru, and he is teaching meditation in the Bhikshu University. With those words, with your permission, may I bring this discussion to a close. And thank you all for your attendance, and particularly the speaker, Madam Karunamani, and the discussion, Professor Premsiri, and of course those others like Professor Channa, who contributed to this immensely and who had been actually the person who helped us to discover Madam Karunamani. And also I can see many others joining here, like Professor Rekha Niyanti, with many others. So we'll have another occasion quite soon to continue our debate.
Yes, I also like to invite all of the scholarly people to arrange again another session about the meditation and some type of neuroscience like that.
Yeah. Okay, then thank you very much for all your interest and attendance and the contributions made. Good luck to you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Children Saranai.
Same.
Okay.
It was fun.
Yeah. Venerable